Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Broken Load Order. You've probably seen a bunch of videos lately about Total War's Battles Warhammer. Jesus Christ, they need to get that title down. Basically, the free-to-play mobile game version of Total War being developed by NetEase, a Chinese cell phone company, basically. There's been a lot of posts about it, a lot of which is incorrect, and a few things which I feel like kind of got missed for some reason. And we're going to get all of that today. But also, kind of at large, I also want to discuss sort of where all these outside influences for Total Warhammer information kind of fall in terms of whether or not they're relevant. So anyways, kick back, grab a glass of milk, and let's get right into it.
Wow.
So in case you missed it recently, CA did about a 25-minute long live stream regarding Total War Battles Warhammer. God, I hate that name. And anyways, the big thing that everyone latched onto was a sort of offhand comment about Cathay. Basically, someone asked about whether or not Cathay is an option for them. They said, you know, it's something interesting and it's something they'd like to consider, but they want to focus on the core races first. Now, a lot of people have taken that and just run with it as saying, you know, Cathay confirmed, or, you know, Cathay is heavily hinted at, you know, it's going to be coming now and stuff like that. These people, unfortunately, they're lying to themselves. Cathay was in no way, shape, or form confirmed. It wasn't even remotely hinted at as coming. In fact, the comment specifically went out of its way to say they want to focus on the races that are core to Total Warhammer first, and then maybe down the road they can look at other stuff. But this has no implications for Cathay showing up either in that little Battles mobile game or in Total Warhammer itself. However, there was one really big piece of information that for some reason seems to be getting ignored, and that's more where I want to latch onto. You see, at around the 10-minute mark, there's a dwarven character shown, and a lot of people assumed it was just, you know, a unit created specifically for this, and I suppose in a roundabout way that's true, but it's interesting for who it is. It's Bazrak Bolgan, who is the right hand to Joseph Bugman, a character who we don't have in Total Warhammer yet. Now, there's a few implications to this, but I mean, first and foremost, I think this ties in really well myself with the FreeLC SteamDB entry that we don't actually have anything for yet. If you watch my previous videos, you'll know that there is something that's still in SteamDB, but it remains completely on its own, so it's not a DLC option, and it wasn't anything to do with the Wood Elves, it's just kind of something sitting there. Now, I want to specifically call out Matthew Lingard for an extremely good suggestion a few months back, saying that this has very good odds of being a White Dwarf exclusive DLC like what we got with Gotrek and Felix. Not only would this tie in from a timeline perspective, this would also tie in extremely well from a thematic perspective, Gotrek of course being a dwarf, but also Joseph Bugman being an extremely common character when it comes to Warhammer stories. Now, if we assume that this is indeed Joseph Bugman, this also does have one interesting implication, which is he would be a legendary lord. I think a lot of people suggested that Joseph Bugman would be a FreeLC, and it was never a concept I was on board with in the first place, but this would be the nail in the coffin for that theory. Why? Well, for the simple fact that his right-hand man is already in as a unit. You wouldn't put in his right-hand man if he himself was only going to be a hero as well. It would make absolutely zero sense to do so. However, if he's a legendary lord, well, now having a specific legendary hero for him makes more sense. Now, all this being said, I am not completely 100% sold on the idea of this being Joseph Bugman or, you know, being an announcement for him for Total Warhammer. First things first, yes, the White Dwarf timing for this would line up. However, Battles isn't anywhere near close to launch yet, so it doesn't really tie in from that perspective. Something I could see, though, is tying it into the Total War access system. So if it sees that you have Total War Battles and you have Total War Warhammer, well, then maybe it can give you Joseph Bugman in Total War Warhammer instead, too, right? That would be a cool tie-in from CA's perspective and would still keep that Malone entry, you know, thematically useful for us. But even that idea still has some issues. Namely, the dwarves aren't playable in the Vortex campaign yet. So unless CA is suddenly going to chuck in a complete faction rework with a FreeLC release, that doesn't really line up. And I really, for the life of me, cannot imagine CA just gives away a faction rework like that for zero financial gain. There is the option for DLC, but that too also has its own separate issues. I think the vast majority of people expect the Beastmen already, but if we expect the Beastmen, by nature that automatically excludes the Dwarves because CA has already said they will not do two separate Game 1 races in the same DLC release. Now you could make the argument that perhaps that the Beastmen aren't the other half of or are not the DLC that's coming up. Maybe it is the dwarves and not the Beastmen at all, but that too also has a lot of issues. First and foremost, the dwarves don't really need a rework, certainly not anywhere near as much as Warriors of Chaos and Beastmen do. That's not to say it's impossible, but it strikes me as highly improbable. And the other remaining problem is that the only real conflict the dwarves have left is Neferata and Skaven. Well, we know it can't be Neferata, or any other Game 1 race for that matter, including the Beastmen, because CA has already said that they will not do 2 Game 1 races, so that's out of the running. And then their only other opponents typically are the Skaven, and there again, the Skaven are done. 12 Ways from Sunday, done. They have way more releases and focus than everyone else, and if CA was audacious enough to do another Skaven release like this, I fully expect the community would turn on them like that. So they don't really have a natural slot apart from potentially a free LC Lord, and that too has its own set of issues. Alright, so then just to sort of recap all the previous stuff we just spoke about, what do I actually think we're looking at here? I do think we are looking at a Josef Bugman tie-in to the release of Total War Battles Warhammer. Jesus Christ, I hate that name. But the thing is that Battles isn't expected to release for quite a while yet. We don't even have an even token date for a release schedule yet. And if you looked at it, I think there's also a really interesting tidbit. Namely, the release trailer almost exclusively focuses on Game 1. It has Game 1 Legendary Lords all the way through, apart from the last 3 seconds. It's all Game 1 races, it's all Game 1 units. It has a pretty distinct focus on Game 1. Now, to put Josef Bugman in there, again, the dwarves are one of the Game 1 core races. It would make perfect thematic sense to tie him in there. So that's what I'm sort of seeing here. I expect that by the time Total Warhammer Battles releases, we're probably going to be deep into Game 3. The dwarves are probably going to be quite overdue for a rework at that point in time. Boom, put in Josef Bugman, off you go, everything's good to go. But again, I said at the start of this video, it's kind of interesting that there's other sources of information, and so I don't want to necessarily make this video drag out forever, so we're going to take a look at that tomorrow, but do stay tuned for that, because I think there's some also really other interesting implications, depending on what we look at from other sources. In the meantime though, I want to thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you all next time.